So the series final of Superman and Lois is airing this Monday night on the CW, ending 23 straight years of DCTV shows on the network, genuinely an end of an era. I was originally hoping to get this video up last weekend so that I could have this up before the penultimate, but that didn't pan out. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I prefer that I didn't get it up or not, because the penultimate did not set up what I thought the finale was going to be. And then the trailer for the finale is also not at all what I was expecting. But some of the stuff I'm going to talk about could be considered spoilers. There's some stuff we know for sure just based off of what certain writers and Todd Helbing and Brett Fleischer and stuff like that, like the showrunners have said in interviews. There are set pictures that I'm not going to show here, but I'll mention one of them because it gives an idea of what the ending is going to look like. There was also a Superman history book that was released this month that includes concept art of something I have a funny feeling will play into the finale. So I guess what I'm saying is, a lot of this isn't just me saying, oh, I hope this will happen. This is me making some educated guesses based off of things we know for sure. So bear in mind that it's more likely than not that this is what the ending might end up looking like. So spoilers. So first off, I'm just going to lay out the facts just based off of what we know, and then I'm going to say what I think the ending will be based off of what is mentioned here. So first off, Bitsy Tulloch, who plays Lois Lane on the show, originally revealed back at San Diego Comic-Con that the series finale will feature a surprise cameo. SupermanandLoisLane.com over on Twitter, in reply to this, revealed that in their upcoming interview with Todd Helbing and Brett Fleischer, the interview will be up on Monday, that they found out that Talro was originally considered for the heart transplant before settling on the Sam Lane idea. And we also know that Todd and Brett have mentioned Tal being written out of the season due to scheduling conflicts. Now, in early October, Entertainment Weekly took some Todd Helbing comments slightly out of context and reported that the show's finale will honor the history of the Arrowverse. Now, I don't think this is as definitive as it sounds, but I'll discuss that in a bit. Before the season began, we found out through interviews that the final episode of Superman and Lois will do something that no Superman adaptation has done before. In an interview back in early October, Helbing and Fletcher did an interview with Entertainment Weekly where they really went in depth about what didn't make it into the final season and what they're thinking about the finale itself. Some important quotes are, "I don't think people are going to think we're ending the show the way that we are." Then they followed up by saying, "We originally had an idea that we had to change a little bit because it was more of a season 7 idea than a season 4 idea, but we're really happy with the adjustment and it's a swing. We think the ending is unexpected, but we also think it does all the things that this show does. It highlights family and the emotions and character, and it really puts a prism on and distills what we think makes this show so special. It's meant to make you leave with big feelings. We want you to miss the show when it's over, so hopefully it works. We were happy with it when we were done, for sure." Helbing says then that the final episode has hopefulness and sadness to it. There's love, there's every feeling, he adds. And I think in some of the most successful, we watched a lot of series finales and talked a lot about them, what worked and what didn't. We wanted to emulate some of the best as far as what an audience is going to feel when they stop watching. After they talk about prior finales from other shows and how they want the show to replicate this feeling of not being an expected ending, being a surprise, maybe an ending that you don't immediately like or you don't immediately enjoy, but as time passes you reflect on it and think, oh, this is actually perfect for the show. Then these next two things can 100% be considered spoilers, but a leaked set picture has a giant wall mural that says 25 years of Steel Works, alluding to the two Irons as being active as heroes for the past 25 years, and then the Superman history book I mentioned earlier includes unused concept art of both Jonathan and Jordan in versions of the Superman or Superboy costumes. So really quickly, let's go over what could be misinterpreted here or what may not be true. So I've seen a lot of people on Twitter over the past 2 months focus on the honoring the Arrowverse quote. That quote is heavily out of context. Helbing just kind of said he was thinking about his years on the Arrowverse while writing the season. I don't think that means we're going to see anything Arrowverse related in the episode. It's also possible that quote simply meant seeing Tom Cavanagh's Gordon Godfrey in episode 8, which, speaking of, I do think that Bitsy's comment about a cameo in the finale could also have potentially just meant Tom, because originally when it was reported he was showing up in this season, a lot of places reported him as being in the finale and nothing about episode 8. So I think maybe it was simply a case of conflicting reports and people getting confused, but it is possible Tom is in the finale in a cameo role as well. Other than that, I don't really know who we could expect. I think Tal is for sure off the board because they've been so adamant about how they couldn't get him. Lucy Lane is a possibility, Jarrell maybe Sam back in some kind of flashback. I've seen some people say like, oh, it's Melissa Benoist Cara, but I think that's way too optimistic. But let's talk about what I think the finale is going to be based off of these comments. So the trailer included almost entirely Superman versus Lex Luthor stuff. I think Superman wins this fight, but it potentially comes at the cost of his powers being gone completely. Like, during this fight, something happens and he finally loses them for good, because that's what the whole season has been saying since episode 1, that Clark as Superman is done. Now, I know a lot of people are saying that doesn't sound like a good finale, but I honestly think that there's no way that this ends with Clark still having his abilities and still being Superman. I also think that from a narrative standpoint, that it will kind of suck for them not to follow up on this, because the season has already been heading in one direction, and I think they really should stick that out. So I think Clark loses his powers in one final fight, and then we get a 25-year time jump to line up with those set pictures. And from here, I think the finale will play out similar to two iconic Superman stories: All-Star Superman and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Interestingly, these are also supposed to be the two biggest inspirations for the 2025 Superman film, but what makes these two likely is, in my opinion, both of these stories in their own ways are meant to be the finale to Superman, the end of his history, that both the stories end with Clark Kent gone, essentially. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is such an interesting one, because it was created right after Crisis on Infinite Earths with the intent of closing out that era of Superman for good. Like, it is supposed to be the final story for the Man of Steel, and the whole forward of this book, the collected version anyway, the one that I have here, is all about John Byrne and Malin Moore describing the fact that they were creating the last Superman story in their opinions and what that meant for him as a character. But the story ends with Clark giving up his powers, faking his death as Superman in one final fight against all of his greatest foes, and those foes include Lex and Brainiac. And a powerless Clark then changes his name and lives out his final days with Lois Lane and their newly born son, Jonathan. Doesn't that sound a little bit familiar? Clark giving up his powers in one final fight with characters like Lex Luthor and Brainiac. I will say I don't think Brainiac's going to play any role in the finale, but you replace Brainiac with Doomsday there, this is quite similar. It also is possible that including Brainiac in the season at all is their way of referencing whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. So I think, you got Lex Luthor, Doomsday, Lex being backed by Milton Fine. The fight ends with Superman losing his powers, and then we see Superman and Lois live out their lives with their sons. I think that that's really similar to whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. All-Star Superman, on the other hand, is a bit different in how it handles the end, because in the comic, our son is dying, and we see Superman travel to do his best to keep the son alive, and he has to stay up there until he can find a way to save the sun, essentially, even if that means he's gone forever, even if that means he has to stay inside the sun and keep it active himself, it means he's gone. And then we sort of see the people of Earth celebrate Superman's legacy and what it means to truly be in a world without. This is also interesting because one of the actual lines in the comic is one of the characters saying a world without Superman, and episode 2 of season 4 is called A World Without. It's A World Without is a reference to both the Death of Superman comic book and All-Star Superman. This season has already been so much about drawing inspiration from other Superman comics and showing why some of them mean so much to the history and the mythos of the character. Like, it feels like they're speedrunning the most iconic stories, such as Death of Superman. Sorry, this video is just an excuse for me to show off my Superman comic book collection, but I think that it makes sense for them to end the season with huge homages to whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow and All-Star Superman, since they are two of the most final versions of the Man of Steel in comic book history. But All-Star Superman is also extremely important because the final pages of it really emphasize Clark and Lois's love for each other. Like, the final panels of this book is Clark talking about how throughout space and time that the love the two share is going to be the most important thing ever. And I think that that's one of the major things we're going to leave with the show giving us, is like being like, Clark and Lois's love is what this show is about. It's at their core. But just based off of all of the comments that the showrunners and the writers in the interviews have left, that they talk about the show ending being hopeful but sad, emphasizing the sentimentality and the emotions and the family aspect of the show, I think that we are taking a 25-year time jump to see the final days of Clark Kent. I think maybe a montage showing Clark and Lois growing old together, but I think that the show will end with potentially a funeral, a real funeral that says goodbye to Clark. And after 25 years, we're going to see people come back to Smallville to say goodbye. And I think that's kind of beautiful. And I think that this is the thing that they're saying has never been done in a Superman adaptation before. Because we've seen Clark give up his powers to live with Lois. The Smallville ending that Crisis on Infinite Earths showed us was exactly that. Clark giving up his powers to live his life with Lois. We've seen Clark give up his identity before, also on Smallville, technically with Supergirl too, so I don't think that's what they're referring to about doing something that's never been done before. And yes, we've seen so many versions of Death of Superman where Clark dies, but we've never seen Clark and Lois grow old together and then see Clark have a natural death. Like, they've really made it clear that someday, and someday sooner than later, Sam's heart is going to give out and Clark's going to be done. And like, I don't know, but I think this is going to make the whole show this sort of wonderfully emotional journey and saga about Clark Kent and Lois Lane and their love for each other, and both of them going around the same time. Like, I've always said that Superman and Lois is at its best when it's focusing on the character moments between the two characters, and I can't wait to see if that's what they're doing here. Also, this plays into that quote, in my opinion, about this not initially being an ending people might be happy with, but when you think about how the entire show has been focused on Clark and Lois's love and the more emotional aspects of their lives and the human aspects of their characters, I think this is the only ending that really works. Now, mentioning the supersuits for the boys, when we do the time jump, I'm expecting to find out that they are both very active as heroes in the future, having taken over from Clark once his powers run out. There are actually two Kryptonian gods and heroes called Nightwing and Flamebird. Dick Grayson in the comics actually gets the name Nightwing from Clark telling Dick the story about Nightwing the character. And I think it would be awesome if John and Jordan take on the mantles of Nightwing and Flamebird, but I also know that the Superman name means so much that people will probably want to have them have that name in some form. Like Jonathan Kent in the comics is Superman now, like he's the main Superman now. So I feel like it would make more sense for Jonathan to end the show as Superman, but I'd also love a Nightwing and Flamebird reference. Anyway, that's how I personally want Superman and Lois's finale to play out. It's also how I think it probably will play out. But how do you feel about this ending? Would you like it? Would you hate it? Let me know. I'm genuinely curious, because I mentioned this on Twitter and I actually got a fair few people being like, that would ruin the show for them, that like they're like, that's not a hopeful ending at all, like the show needs to end with Clark having his powers and still being Superman. But I think that's such a safe ending, and we've seen that ending done in so many versions of Superman before. Like, how many versions of Superman have ended with him still having his powers and being up there, being the hero or whatever? This would add such a finality and a feeling that the show has always been focused on the characters and the humans themselves and less about like Superman as a whole, and I think that's so cool. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts on it are. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, because there's going to be DCTV videos every week. If you're not new, then a like and a share always helps. Thanks so much for watching and have an amazing day.